We have a jokester in the audience. Welcome everyone, and thanks for coming out to LA2M today. This is going to be a really first-rate talk. And my name is Mary Lou Olds. I'm the manager for LA2M, and I'm really glad to see all of you here. Do we have any first-time attendees here today? Well, thanks for coming out. I'm glad to see all of you. So just for the folks that are new, to let you know, we have some announcements at the beginning. That will be followed by our speaker, Paul. He'll speak for about a half an hour. I'll have time for questions after that. And then everyone will have an opportunity to introduce themselves after the program. So, LA2M is a 501c3 nonprofit. We support ourselves through sponsorships from our attendees and from local businesses. I don't see Ross here today. 3.7 Designs is our sponsor for this month. So they do fabulous websites, and if you have any website needs, they'd be a great company to contact. So, we would have heard from Ross, but he's not here. We also have a March sponsorship that's available, so see me afterwards if you have any questions about that or would like to be our March sponsor. The other way that we support ourselves is by passing the hat. It helps us with our hard costs and being able to continue to put on these programs. So Stacy's going to start the bucket around, and we suggest a donation of $5. If you're able to do that, that's great. If you're not able to do that, then welcome anyway. And then at this point, we're all right. Carter, would you like to take a photograph?
Carter, okay. Take a picture.
Okay. All righty. We always present a t-shirt to our speaker, and the t-shirts are sponsored by Bank of Ann Arbor. We live stream this event, so if at any point you're not able to attend a future LA2M, you can find us live streaming, or Roger also videos, and the presentations are put up on our website as well. And Emily is live tweeting here the hashtag LA2M, so if you'd like to participate in that, be sure to use that hashtag. Carter takes all the pictures for our event and he posts those up on Facebook, so look for those as well. Without further ado, I'd like to present our speaker, Paul Schutt. He's going to talk to us about the evolving media models and how those changes have an impact on the future of our cities. So if we can have a round of applause for our speaker, we'll get started.
Not sure. Can you hear me okay? Is it mic'd at all? Yeah. It is. Okay, you can hear me. Thank you. So to give you a little bit of background about what Issue Media Group is, and then I'll take you through what we do. So we currently publish online news in about 20 different regions around the U.S. We cover about 14 different states, including the province of Ontario. But how I came to this work was, prior to this, I actually had a tech firm, and we did work all over the country, but we actually ended up getting connected to the governor of Michigan at the time, who was very interested in trying to better understand why were companies moving where they were moving. And then when the new governor came in, she was very interested in trying to figure out why were people moving where they were moving. And so we started a multi-year project, ran into some fascinating research and some ideas. And along the way, we were approached in 2004 to sell that company. And during that transaction, I met a gentleman from Viacom, a guy named Brian Boyle. And Viacom had been watching traditional media decline, trying to figure out what they were going to do online. And so they started launching what they called online magazines. They came out once a week. They were free to readers. So we ended up taking this concept and applying it to cities. And we actually launched our first publication in Detroit, a publication called Model D. From there, we've now expanded to places like Philadelphia, Toronto, Tampa, Florida, Minneapolis. Our last two publications have been in Washington, D.C., and also in Denver. We publish a number of publications here in Michigan. Some of them hopefully you've seen, things like Model D or Concentrate here in Ann Arbor. in Washtenaw. And to give you a sense of scale of what we do, last year we originated a little over 30,000 stories. We have about 600 paid journalists that write for us across the country. Each market typically has a staff of 5 writers and then about another 15 or 20 freelancers that we call on. The basic idea behind what we write about came out of an observation that we made initially in Detroit. We weren't sure how special this was to Detroit, but the local media seemed largely interested in loss. When there was job loss, it was really well covered. When there was crime at the neighborhood level or scandal, there was a lot of sophistication, which we believe in. I mean, you need to bring sunlight to corruption, make the world better. But we also noticed there was a huge gap in coverage. So my first company, we grew it steadily for 10 years. It didn't seem to matter how many people we hired, how many offices we opened. We never saw a day of coverage in 10 years. So after we sold the company, we were sitting back at it. We were on the 20th floor of the Fisher Building in Detroit thinking, how many companies were like ours? There's nothing to drive by, nothing to see, doing work all over the country, but we're largely invisible. And we saw the same thing happening in the city of Detroit, where a number of our friends were investing in neighborhood redevelopment, doing 4 units of infill housing here, opening this here, and there was almost no coverage. At the same time, we were seeing a collapse in media. This is now about 10 years ago. And we're seeing many of the newspaper journalists being let go. And so we thought, what if we could scoop them up and instead of assigning them to go find crime, what if we assigned them to go find every dollar being invested in Detroit? And so for us, it had nothing to do with good news versus bad news. We were trying to figure out what's next for Detroit, and the only way we knew how to do it was follow the money. I mean, if we were to stack up every murder in Detroit that year, it would give us very little insight to what was going to happen in the next 2 to 3 years in the city. So what we started to do was about 20 stories a week in each one of these markets, or 1,000 stories a year, about all the dollars being invested in real estate at the neighborhood level, small business growth, at the same nonprofit growth, and investment and innovation. One of the things we quickly figured out is that Detroit was seen in a very clear way for most people, and they saw a lot of blight. So what we started to realize is that we needed to help people see the neighborhood differently and think about the place differently, because it wasn't a fair representation of what we were seeing. So each week, the publication has a masthead, or what we would consider like the cover of our magazine. So this is a shot, for example, of downtown Detroit. Maybe not today, but on a somewhat regular basis in the summer. So each week these shots change. So this is a shot, of course, of Ypsilanti. We have shots of downtown Grand Rapids, the Over-the-Rhine neighborhood in Cincinnati, kind of an interesting shot out of Washington, D.C., also the Kensington Market in Toronto. So each week, what we wanted to do is we have journalists assigned to finding 5 to 10 stories about investments being made at the neighborhood level. Again, these could be small incremental investments, but we organize them neighborhood by neighborhood. We see neighborhoods in these cities as emerging markets. We want to create as much transparency as we can in these markets, because what we found is that transparency increases investment in many of these places. If people are interested in the Corktown neighborhood of Detroit and they can understand who's in and for how much, that just encourages additional understanding and investment. So one of the things we've done in addition to the regular weekly coverage of news, we'll actually do these kind of analysis pieces. This is where we took the Corktown neighborhood in Detroit, and we took one block and then we took one side of the street, and we looked at it over the last decade to see how much investment was made. So you'll see all the way to the left, this is when Phil Cooley came in and bought the building that Slows is in, rehabbed it with a friend. And then since then, you'll see every one of these plots along the way in this infographic to see all the incremental investment. And what we'll do throughout this piece is, if you were to scroll down, you would see, how many jobs being created, how many dollars being invested. Because most people come into Detroit and they see Slows and they just say, oh, this block is a nice kind of gem of a block. But 10 years ago, many of those buildings, the roofs were burned off. I mean, there was very little there. And you had these incremental investments that triggered a whole series of additional investments. And we want to capture that kind of transformation week by week. We do the same thing in the nonprofit space. We started seeing the role that the nonprofit were playing, and at the same time the philanthropic sector was playing. And what we've noticed is that as the newspaper industry has continued to contract, this is an area that has seen significant loss in coverage. the media just doesn't have the same resources they used to cover these types of innovative solutions happening in the nonprofit space. And of course, we do the same thing around job growth. We have journalists assigned in every market to find at least 5 companies every week adding new economy job growth. And the way that we actually kind of applied this and how we find so much of this is we kind of took Chris Anderson's kind of this good old long tail model and we really applied it to the media. And what we started to notice is that the media really prefers a big story. So when 1,000 jobs are announced to come to Ann Arbor, that will be really well covered. When our company last year added 5 jobs in Washington, D.C., the Washington Post did not come out to cover our arrival by any means, right? And yet when you look at what a number of economists and foundations will say, 90% of net job growth comes from those companies adding 2, 5, 10 jobs at a time, and yet in many cases that stuff is just so small for traditional media to cover considering all the contraction. And so for us, whenever we'll find a company, let's say, of course, we all know Doug Song and his success with Duo Security, when we would cover a story like this, we also started to try and figure out how to apply a slightly different business model to what we were doing. We're not advertising based at all. And one of the ways that we started to do this was when we would interview someone like Doug for this piece that we did, we actually ended up talking to a friend who helped us launch one of our early publications, and he left to go to Bloomberg. He's recruited Bloomberg, and what he ended up sharing with us, and I had never heard this before, but when you read a Bloomberg story, there's actually a data record attached to each story. And so how we ended up applying this was that when our journalists are interviewing Doug about job growth, saying, hey, we just added 6 more people, they're actually populating a data record running down the side. So Doug, where'd you go to school? What boards do you sit on? What year were you founded? How many employees? What industries are you working in? What occupations did you hire? And we're able to take all of this data that we gather about the growth that we're covering and start putting it into kind of dashboards and composites. So this is a program that we do with the Small Business Association of Michigan that came to us and was very frustrated. They were very frustrated that the narrative of Michigan is driven by the auto industry and that our futures are all really in their hands. And they just did not see it that way. So they said, what if you were able to increase your coverage around small business and start gathering all this data? So when Doug's firm added 6 people, the little odometer you'll see in the upper left-hand corner rolled up by another 6 jobs. So we've been doing this for almost 3 years now, and we've been tracking anywhere from 1,200 to 2,200 jobs every single month being created by small businesses that in the past were really just kind of largely unreported or uncaptured. And then we're able to kind of slice that data and understand where in the state, what industries, what occupations, and then you can continue to drill down to better understand how some of these jobs are being created. And these are not like traditional economic development measures. Like when I said 1,000 jobs came to Ann Arbor, most of us in Ann Arbor know that 1,000 jobs did not come to Ann Arbor. It was a few hundred jobs with the ability, with hopefully up to 1,000, and I think that was maybe 8 years ago, and I think Google's brought a lot of great things, but it's still not to 1,000. These are actual, we added 6 jobs. The CEO is quoted as adding 6 jobs. So how this business model also played is we're able to take that data that we've learned about these companies and we're able to license it out to others. We found that this data does not exist in other places. So someone like the Small Business Association of Michigan, which is a group that's often trying to reach out and build their membership, came to us and they had 6,000 members. What we did is after Doug's story was covered, Doug would have received an email like this that said, congratulations, here's a link to your story, add it to Facebook, add it to Twitter. By the way, this story was made possible with support by SBAM. And at that point, SBAM offers them a free membership in the Small Business Association of Michigan. Now SBAM has grown from 6,000 members to 22,000 members. So it's a way for them, and think about all the law firms that are looking for that startup that's going from just an idea to now needing intellectual property help. Or all the bankers out there that have clients, that are looking for clients that are going from running their business on a credit card to a proper line of credit. So when we're able to provide this feed of who are the growing companies and how are they doing it is much of our goal. So when I said our model is not advertising based, what we did is we ended up taking kind of 2 models and mashing them up. And the reason we didn't do it advertising based is because when we looked at the media space and the people who were basing their business on ad sales, they were either going out of business or laying off more than half their staff. So we weren't interested in following that model. So we looked at 2 models that we really admired. One was NPR, If you've ever listened to NPR and heard their underwriting model, you'll hear, at some point during your day, you'll hear coverage of entrepreneurship made possible with support by the Kauffman Foundation. And so what we started to learn about that model and how we applied it in our business is someone like Kauffman as a foundation does all of their work in one area. They really don't feel like they're hearing enough coverage about entrepreneurship in the media, so they'll approach NPR with a pile of money and say, would you be interested in increasing your coverage of entrepreneurship with this, we'll give you this pile of money if you'll do it. NPR, of course, would love to do more coverage on entrepreneurship, would love to have the pile of money, but you have to set up ground rules. It needs to remain independent journalism. So the client cannot interfere in the coverage. They don't get to assign stories, review stories, or approve stories. So we've taken that same model to remain as an editorial independent publication, but the client does get to say, we want to see an increase in this area. So I'll give you an example of how we've done this in the nonprofit space. The Kellogg Foundation, we had started working with the Kellogg Foundation. They, of course, through this relationship with cereal over the years, have become very interested in vulnerable children and the things that are helping vulnerable children improve their situation. So what we said is over the next 3 years, we're going to dedicate journalists to go out and find really innovative solutions in the nonprofit space that are improving things for kids. So first thing we figured out is that we couldn't be experts in this area quickly enough. So we started to organize what we called editorial advisories. This is where we would go into a place like Grand Rapids and start meeting with the nonprofit space around housing, around food systems, around all of these different areas that are challenging for children in poverty, and started asking them, what are the stories that aren't being told? What are the stories that are missing nuance? Where are there misconceptions around this space? And so we will fill the table with 10 or 12 of these organizations and kind of get these story ideas. And so one of the stories that we actually ended up finding was a program from an organization called Kids Food Basket that we had not run into before. Bridget, who became a friend of mine, it turns out, so Bridget was a school teacher who noticed that her kids were going home from school and mom and dad would hand them a bag of chips for dinner. And since the kids were already getting a healthy breakfast and lunch at school, she figured, well, what if I could pack their backpacks full of healthy dinner? So she starts doing this for the kids in her school, then her grade, then the whole school, then the school district, now the entire county. They now have 15,000 volunteers packing backpacks for kids every day. They even have kids who receive backpacks, packing backpacks for other kids. So this program scales, becomes a huge success. So we start interviewing Bridget on how did you pull this off? And then we dig into the program in greater detail. How exactly did you, kind of figure out the impact? And at the same time, how have you figured out the resources to pull this together? So how are you getting money from the county, from the faith-based organizations, from the grocers and so forth? And the whole idea behind us doing this was really the idea that we're hoping that the kind of innovation we're covering is that there's someone now sitting in Milwaukee, a school teacher, that is seriously experiencing something very similar and saying, I'm not in Grand Rapids, I'm not in Michigan, we need to take this idea and twist it 30 degrees and make a Milwaukee solution. So hopefully this type of innovation inspires some other activities. But our whole idea is that we do want to cover difficult issues like childhood obesity or child hunger, and not just say it's an epidemic, here's how bad the numbers are, here's who's suffering. Our next two lines are, and here are two really innovative programs that are making a difference about it. And this is something that we're starting to see across the board. I just had a call 2 days ago with David Bornstein with the New York Times, and they've started an entire initiative around this solution journalism. So this is kind of an entire movement that we're seeing across. He works with the top 40 newspapers across the country implementing this type of journalism. So something that started to happen to our business maybe about 4 years ago is that we had a story that ran in our Model D, our Detroit publication, on a Tuesday, and then by the weekend edition of the Detroit Free Press, we saw a very similar version of that story appear. It was so remarkably similar to what we ran on Tuesday, it kind of caught our attention. And this kind of kept happening. So we finally ended up talking with Stephen Henderson, one of the senior people at the Free Press, who just kind of asked, what do you make of this? Is this real? And he reassured us that their budgets have been slashed. They have fewer journalists than they've ever had. We've hired many of their former colleagues, and they refer to us as what they call a story farm. And so, and really what was shared was they have hours and hours of news to fill every day. And they just don't have the boots on the ground anymore. And he also clarified even further, saying, Paul, when the mayor's going to prison, we have to cover that. When the city's in bankruptcy, we have to cover that. As much as we'd love to go cover this food system thing, you know, we just don't have the capacity. We'd love to partner with you guys on those stories. So each week we have our team, we have a person on our staff dedicated to connecting the managing editor in Detroit with the Free Press and saying, here are the 20 stories we're doing in Detroit. So a couple weeks ago we did one on bus rapid transit in Detroit, where you'll see on the left it appeared in our publication, and then on the right that story appeared in the Free Press. And this story appeared on the homepage. A week after that, or actually earlier in the year, we did a piece on the historic rehabs. This appeared in our Detroit publication, and then we actually partnered with WDET to do a 14-minute segment on it, where they brought our journalists and others on. This is one we did in Ann Arbor about affordable housing and what we could learn from Santa Cruz. And so this appeared here, and then it appeared in the Huffington Post and went national. This is one we just did recently on the Detroit Bus Company that was picked up by MLive, and at the same day was picked up by Michigan Radio. So this is a new dynamic that we're starting to see in the media, where 4 to 6 years ago, this probably wouldn't be possible. But now the new realities of what's happening in the media. So in a lot of ways, when you look at our model, when we have an underwriter, like the Kellogg Foundation, that comes in and says, the media just doesn't have the resources to cover the types of things that are impacting their world, where do they go to increase that? So we're able to go out and cover it. And then how this plays out is we might have that story appear in Model D on the left, and then of course we push it through social media, Facebook, Twitter, and so forth. But then after that, we offer it out to these 20 media partners throughout the state, who in turn, this becomes a cycle. They share it through their social media strategy also, because they of course want to be tweeting as often as they possibly can with really interesting content. And then our clients also are given license to use it themselves. So this is the W.K. Kellogg Foundation website, where they also need content for their website, their blog, their newsletter, their social media strategy. So we kind of serve a need there also. So again, in the spirit of trying to show how we think things are shifting in the media a little bit, this is a program that we started doing in Philadelphia about 1.5 years ago. And we actually call it On the Ground, but the whole idea is really embedded journalism. Most of us know this term from the military, but what we've started to do is apply this to cities. So what happened in Philadelphia is there's a neighborhood there called Germantown. It's a slightly fringe neighborhood, probably not their most prosperous neighborhood, not the coolest neighborhood, doesn't get a ton of coverage. Their neighborhood CDC approached the head of our publication and said, would you like some free office space? And we covered this neighborhood, but not a ton. So what ended up happening was we actually ended up going over, having a look at it, and it was a space that had been vacant for years. And we went in with them, activated the space. You can see it's on, maybe not the nicest block. We went in and we activated the space, and we actually brought our team of journalists in, housed them there. They went to work there every day, embedded themselves in this neighborhood. We also worked with local arts groups, who again had a number of artists in this neighborhood that had never really been shown in a gallery. We converted this space into a gallery space. So they had regular showings of artists who again had not been out of the neighborhood much. And we started to report on that neighborhood on a weekly basis. We also started to convene the neighborhood groups, a lot of the pastors and the people who have been holding this neighborhood together for 20 or 30 years, and really try and engage them. And then we started actually holding events in the space. This was kind of a DIY maker space to get people from all over Philadelphia who are interested in this issue but had never been to this neighborhood. All of a sudden we're kind of extroverting this neighborhood in a way, and we ended up helping work on design charrettes and all of these things to kind of activate this part of town. And at the end of the year, when we had done this in 4 neighborhoods, we actually ended up bringing the 4 different neighborhoods we had done this together into one of the prominent galleries in Center City in Philly, and held an exhibition on both floors of the gallery, and then brought all these artists who had only been maybe shown ever in these neighborhood galleries to one of the more prominent galleries in Philly. And so really what we're trying to do with this is really start disrupting the narratives around the neighborhoods that were being seen. We tried to embed ourselves in so that we could think differently about the neighborhood. It ended up triggering interest from people like the Philadelphia Inquirer, WHYY, and other media in that neighborhood that certainly didn't have the resources to do that kind of project. So because we're running into a lot of these issues and ideas across the country, we've now started to establish national networks. What we started to notice when we reached about 15 or 16 markets, we first noticed this in Toronto, that they started asking, what are you seeing in Minneapolis? What are you seeing in Philly? What are you seeing in DC? Most of the cities that we're running into are working on the same issues. Transportation is a key issue. They're all working on how do we attract talent? How do we increase entrepreneurship? How do we work on improving food systems? So we've started to say, how could we take the local individualized small stories that we're seeing and actually kind of bubble them up into a national network where we're able to better understand innovative solutions happening all over the country. We don't need like the smartest person in the room to kind of originate the idea first here. The idea is how could we take an idea that's really working in Portland or working in Minneapolis and see, again, twist it 30 degrees and see how it applies in other cities. And I guess I would say the one thing that we're running into is we're certainly not the only ones doing this, right? I mean, where the inspiration for what we do actually came from originally was Fast Company magazine. And I don't know how many of you have ever seen Fast Company, but very forward-thinking tech magazine. You don't read it to figure out who's going out of business. You read it to try and figure out what's next in business. And so what we were trying to figure out is how do we figure out what's next in a place? And so we've run into people like Good Magazine, or Monocle does this on a global scale. Or if you're reading Next City, which used to be Next American City, or things like Atlantic Cities. These are all people who are looking for innovative solutions to these really complex issues. And I guess one of the last two things I'll leave you with is this conversation I was having with David Bornstein really helped me, he summed it up rather well. And so when I started this discussion today around, we noticed that the media was covering loss and scandal and all of these things. David, this is a New York Times journalist sharing this with us, which was, it's not so much about people doing terrible things that are hidden from view, it's about people doing remarkable things that are hidden from view. And so our whole idea is how do we raise the visibility of the people who are doing things we want to see more of versus raising the visibility of those people we want to see less of. And we're trying to figure out, how this could move things forward. And actually, we recently saw some research, you may have seen this from the Knight Foundation, that worked with the Gallup organization. You probably have heard of Gallup polls and so forth. So Gallup has historically done some interesting work with corporations. Really what Gallup has been trying to figure out is, do happy employees, or how you feel at your job, does that translate into profitability and growth for the company? So if a company is filled with people who are really happy and fulfilled, does it make the company perform better? So really, Knight Foundation hired Gallup to ask the same question about cities. So does it matter how people feel about their place and the prosperity of their community? And really what they found is a one-to-one connection. If you haven't had a chance to look at the research, it's fascinating to see that the more people feel about their community, the more connected they are to it, and the more prosperous it is. And they lay out really, really compelling examples. So we're actually hoping that, one, we want to bring transparency to the world, but we also think that we can contribute to this in some way. So anyway, thank you for your time, and I hope it was at least entertaining lightweight. Yes. Oh, you need a mic.
We're going to take some questions now.
Thanks, Paul. It's been really good information. I've got a whole bunch of questions, actually, but I'll skip all on you. So, is really any of this possible without the shift, the paradigm shift to digital? I mean, obviously, I think if we didn't have the social media outlets and mobility that we have today, the free press picking up your stories, I mean, they're obviously going across in such a digital format. Could you comment on, I guess what I'm trying to ask is, how has digital really changed, like, over the last 4 years, what you're saying, you're seeing the things do you put that to digital, or what do you think that is caused by?
No, I do. I think digital just really largely kind of destroying the traditional media model. That kind of crisis that it's created has enabled everything we're doing. And on top of that, I mean, the talent that we work with right now, 10 years ago, they wouldn't write for us. Now we can hire almost anybody. I mean, there are a number of people like in Washington, right for the Washington Post, that will contribute to us. I mean, there's that tier of talent. And to your very point, I mean, when we look at it, so when I mentioned earlier that the Free Press will reuse our content, they will not put it in print. Okay, this is still like an interesting divide. And we totally get this. They want to originate their own content as much as they can. They will leverage it online all day long. Now, again, we expect that to shift. I mean, if you think about what the AP wire was, The AP wires, they just didn't have the resources to put people all over the world and cover national stories. So the newspapers, even if you looked at them 10 years ago, half the newspaper was national news that they were licensing from someone else. So we're not really pioneering all that much. We're just kind of moving it towards almost trying to be a local AP wire in some cases. But I think to your point, like the model that I was showing you before with this kind of trajectory of we cover it, it goes to social, and then they leverage it. I mean, I think to your very point, it would be almost impossible to do what we're doing in an offline environment, I think. I mean, well, AP Wire did it, so maybe not impossible, but, you know.
I'll ask another question then. So, from a business standpoint or for other businesses, I mean, is it advantageous for them to come to you when you talk about your clients? So, ABC company, I don't know, are they able to create revenue models from this?
So the challenge is that we work with very few small companies. We don't do advertising, and it's not a pay-for-play model. You can't pay us to write about you. Otherwise, nobody would ever take our content. So we have to remain, legitimate, independent journalism. So we've really struggled with how do we work with smaller businesses. So that's why you'll notice our clients are often larger stakeholders, banks, higher ed, healthcare, foundations, that are really trying to move big issues forward. But I do think that there are a lot of things that we're learning about. I mean, what I shared with you is maybe 20% or a third of our business. There are a whole bunch of other things that we do to generate revenue that other media companies do that most people are just not even aware of. And we have an entire custom publishing side of our business because we have 600 paid journalists all throughout the country. The U.S. Army came to us and said, hey, we love what you guys are doing. I don't know if we should be an underwriter, but we would love you to take over our publication. So we are able to assign photographers and journalists to go in and cover innovation within the military, and they just circulate it within themselves, like their own internal newsletters. We do this for other cities. So Oakland County, actually, we do a custom publication for Oakland County every other week, which covers all the innovation happening in Oakland County, but it's their name on it, it's their brand, they have control, we're just the talent. So there are ways that we've been able, and this happens all over the place. I mean, Cranes does these, every major media company does custom publishing. We're not, I think we're just doing it online in ways that maybe they haven't made it quite there yet.
There's one more question then. So, obviously, through all these processes, there's a lot of data that's being gathered.
Yes.
And obviously, I would assume that a lot of either the clients or either your company or the clients are interested in how to utilize that data. Do you guys do that, or is this something that is a byproduct of the journalism that you've obviously created a segment that you can now target market to, potentially?
So, I mean, I personally, in my company, think that that's probably one of the biggest opportunities we have in the future, because even somebody like Small Business Association of Michigan, they're an influential group. They came to us and said they can't buy this data. They just can't. If they wanted to get a list of only growing companies, and the thing that we saw, to your point, is, so something like Dun & Bradstreet, you'd think Dun & Bradstreet could provide this. The problem is, like, if as a CEO, Dun & Bradstreet calls you and wants to do a 2-minute survey, you won't even take 2 minutes to do the survey. But if a journalist calls you, you'll spend an hour on the phone telling them everything, right? And so the thing is we're able to do is capture this data. Now, we don't expose the data to everyone. We expose slivers of the data. But we actually think the more that we can put this data together, we're not there yet. If we can start doing 30,000, of the 30,000 stories we do a year, if all of them had a data component. So, like an example, so the city of Washington, D.C. buys our data. And really what D.C. is interested in is D.C. has one narrative, which is like, why would people move to Washington, D.C. to work for the federal government? But that's not where the growth is in D.C. That's where all the contraction is, right? Like the federal government's not hiring more people these days. They're laying off people. Where they're actually seeing growth is in the first 6 months we published in D.C., we covered 180 startups. And so you're seeing this incredible tech boom happening there. And these are all app development firms, like people like Living Social are based there, Blackboard. But this is largely invisible. This is not the narrative of that place. So that's one way they're looking at data, saying if a company starts in DC because they have so many smart people there, how do they make sure they don't leave? And then the other way that they're leveraging data is that every time we cover real estate development, they're really struggling. If you've been to DC recently, the rate of growth of housing growth and commercial growth is like off the charts. And so they're running into, should they be forcing developers to build so many parking? So every time we do a story about real estate investment, we have to track how many parking spaces Because really what they're trying to do, now there are requirements. If you build 155 units, you have to have so many parking spaces. Well, if you've hung out in DC, there's plenty of transportation options. They have the metro, like their subway system, that they have just endless streams. Do they need to really require this much parking in trying to make it more developer friendly? So there are a lot of ways our data is being used in ways that we never intended. But I actually personally think that that's going to be the most interesting, and it's almost completely invisible. I mean, we're doing the stories anyway, right? I mean, we're going to go out and cover this. Why not capture the data? I've never understood why people like Cranes and others haven't done it. I mean, I'm not criticizing Cranes. They have a great business, but I've never understood why they didn't.
Other questions?
When you license a story to a mainstream media operation, do they pay you for it?
No, it's free. And part of it is our clients are underwriters. They're coming to us because the media doesn't cover this right now, and they feel like it needs to, there needs, again, there a lack of coverage around vulnerable children, any of this stuff. Unless somebody's suffering or someone dies, right? But who's covering the stuff that's preventing them from dying or helping them improve their lives? And so we'll go out and find that innovation, and we don't want any barrier between what we've created. And so we leverage the same idea. NPR talks about this model of COPE. How do you create a piece of content once and publish it every? So our whole model is how does it appear in Model D, and then we share it on the Free Press and NPR and MLive and all of these guys. So our model is make it as easy to share as possible. Very much in the spirit of online.
Hi, it's very interesting.
Thank you.
I'm just curious from the data perspective, how did you go about deciding what data, I mean, it's kind of obvious some of them, but I'm just curious, did you have a schema already decided, or has it kind of add as you go, or?
It's evolving. I mean, there were some things we knew we wanted to capture, like how many jobs, and we always ask, are these like churn? Are you just replacing people you fired, or or people that just didn't work out, or are you actually adding incremental jobs? And it's actually started to serve, and I don't want to overstate how sophisticated we are, but we're starting to develop, it's almost like a CRM tool for our journalists, right? So like if your company added 6 people, they typically will say, do you expect to add another in 6 months? And they'll say, yeah, we're thinking about 2 or 3 more. Well, that becomes like a little bit of like a CRM solution where they ping our journalists and say, hey, it's time to call you again and see if that growth actually happened. But gathering the individual ideas, that's where sometimes we'll talk. So there were some people like MEDC and some like the New Economy Initiative and others who have come to us who launch all these programs, right? They're doing a business plan competition, they're doing an early stage fund. When we're interviewing people now, we say, did you use any of these programs? Because one of the questions is, are the people that are actually growing, are they using these programs, or are they doing it despite, not despite these programs, but they're just doing it no matter what. The other thing we started to ask, things like tax policy, does tax policy impact your decision to be here and to add jobs? I think the narrative in the media is endlessly, of course, lower taxes, but we're not seeing it. There's a big piece in the New York Times this past weekend that was talking about tax policy doesn't impact entrepreneurs hardly at all. We're just starting to try and get smarter.
So in some ways, the data is impacting the scripts that you go with as well.
To ask the questions, exactly. I mean, that's a really good example. Like in DC, when the city came to us and said, yes, we'd like to buy the data, if you could ask this one question about parking spaces, that would help us. If you could, and then they came back to us this year and said, could you ask questions about affordable housing? How many of these units are affordable versus just market rate? Because even though they have a lot of data, it's really hard for them to kind of get it out in a weird way, which is always shocking to people that like people see the government and think they are all knowing. They really struggle with this stuff.
So when you share with Detroit Free Press, they don't pay, but you would appreciate metrics back so that you can show the foundations that that's worthwhile. Do you get that in terms of views, impressions, clicks, or?
It's a great question, and that's really the relationship you've described is really what we've asked them for. So we ask always for attribution. Please put a link back to us. It helps us with Google. It helps us with everything, right? But the other side, so the people that do it the best are Huffington Post. Huffington Post, when they share one of our stories, they send metrics back to us and say, here's how many views, here's how many shares, how many likes, all these types of things that we're able to get. most of these organizations are not, a lot of this taking content and it's relatively new, so maybe that will evolve. But we've always felt that's a fair trade, right? Like we'll give you the content, just give us impact back. So some are doing it, we hope that others will do it. But we've also found, I mean, not to go on and on, but we've also found other ways to leverage media partners. So we do speaker series all over the place. And so now what we'll do is we'll partner with the Free Press where when we do a speaker series in Detroit, Stephen Henderson will be the moderator. When we did an education series recently, the Michigan Radio, like the NPR affiliate, one of their commentators was the moderator of our session on education. So there are ways that the Free Press doesn't want to do is they've shared this. They're not really excited about doing speaker events. They're not really set up for it, So in a lot of ways we can leverage. They get content. They're able to promote it a little bit for us. They get exposure, but they're not really in that business. They're not sure they want to be in that business.
So one last thing, would it ever come down to maybe one of the foundations asking for how much ad revenue Free Press made off of your story?
We hope they made a whole bunch. We want them to be successful. I mean, we don't see it as zero. Nobody's going to stop reading Model D because of the Free Press, or vice versa. What's that?
Would they share it with you?
I don't even know if they would. And I'm not even, funny to say, I'm not sure it's my business. You know what I mean? I'm happy for them to be incredibly healthy and profitable. So let's hope they are. We need them. We actually need them to cover the corrupt politicians and all these other things that make the world better. We just want to be able to do the other side of it too.
So you've done a bit with email, I know, because I get them, the website. But what's your kind of mobile strategy? It doesn't seem like the sites that I've looked at are very mobile friendly.
Yeah, so part of our, I think that's a very, very fair comment. So they've been migrated slowly. So this is the challenge. Is we run about 20 some of our own publications that come out every week. We also do about 15 custom publications that I mentioned. So we have a pretty good size infrastructure to maintain. So if you looked at Washington, D.C. or Denver right now, they're very much done for adaptive design. All of these things are there. And then once we've done them for that market, then the other markets get migrated. And it's just somewhat where they are in the cycle. So, I wish we could do that and have 40 sites overnight, be fixed. But, we want to remain, cash flow positive and profit. We want to remain all the healthy things we need to be, and so it takes time. But I think your comment is, I'll make sure that I take that one back and, push that up the line.
Any other questions? I do have one. The communities in which you're located, what size are they and why?
They're all over the place. So we are in some of the largest markets in the country. So Toronto, I think is probably the 4th largest metro in North America. DC is in the top 5. Philly is the top 5th, is the 5th largest. And we also have places as small as Traverse City or the UP or even, Washtenaw. This probably is one of our smallest markets in the entire network. And so we're trying. The question that you're raising that we've also asked is, will our model only work in what we call struggling markets? Detroit, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, places like that, or will it work in prosperous markets? Will it work in a place like Toronto, which has 100,000 new people moving to the Toronto region every year? Or DC. The rate of growth of some of these places is off the charts. We're still trying to figure out where, it sounds funny, but we can see DC last year was our fastest growing publication. So that's great, but financially, you look at Detroit as one of our most financially best performing publications, Pittsburgh and Cincinnati. Is it because there's more pain there? We don't know. So we're trying to balance, readership growth, revenue growth, and we don't have it figured out. We're just still trying to kind of look at different scenarios. So it's a great question, though.
Does it have to do with digital savvy communities?
We don't know about that as much as it is a major, Toronto is the New York of Canada, right? Every media company is based in Toronto. You look at DC and you've got the Washington Post. These are just incredibly sophisticated media markets. And in Michigan, it's a thinner media market. There isn't as much competition here. It might seem like there's a lot of competition here, but compared to those markets, it's very thin.
And on her same question, you talked about the gaps
those areas that areas of opportunity is really what I question. Is it that you're not picking out these impoverished areas, or you're not picking out the affluent areas, one or the other? It's the gap analysis that really drives the need or the opportunity in your case.
In some cases, like right now, next week we're going to be launching in Memphis. And I'd never been to Memphis. I was speaking at a conference in Leipzig and then in Berlin, talking about what we're doing and how it could apply to Europe. And met somebody from the Aerotropolis in Memphis, and they said, "Hey, would you come to Memphis?" We go to Memphis, and it's wide open. I mean, there's like almost nothing. To your point on the gaps, just endless gaps. And so that came together pretty quickly. So.
Anyone else? All right. Okay. Final question.
Yeah. Paul, just related to that, just more generally about competition. So, I mean, it seems like, just to take Ann Arbor or Washington County as an example, it seems like there's a lot of new publications in this area, but you don't, for what you do, you don't see competition? Or?
We do. I have to say, if anything, I think MLive has evolved probably in one of the, I'd say MLive is doing a better, I'll say they're more in our space than they were 3 years ago. I think their coverage of small incremental growth is there. The competition for the dollars here. So the challenge is like, Ann Arbor doesn't have a lot of people we can do business with. I know that sounds strange, but a lot of our funding for Concentrate doesn't come from Ann Arbor. It comes from people like the Kellogg Foundation that care about Ann Arbor, or larger funders that care about, like our business now, we do have a chunk of funding that comes from the local. And then we have now a lot of clients that care about a lot of cities or the whole state. And now we're starting, part of the reason I'm working in DC is to work with groups who care about lots of places all over the country. So we have found Ann Arbor to be, it's very specifically, Ann Arbor, it's tough. If you look who advertised, and I don't know anything about MLive, right? I'm just a consumer. I like what they do. I admire what they do. But if you look at their advertisers, it's, in a lot of cases, it's, kitchen cabinet. There's a lot of like mid-level, it's a different sales model. We don't sell ads. And so we need people who can commit to all of our commitments are at least a year long. And so it's just a very different model. So from a readership perspective, also, I think MLive does a great job. But there is certainly room. There's absolutely room. We think, at least. We see it.
Okay, everyone. Thanks for all the great questions. We've come to the part of the program now where everyone has an opportunity to introduce themselves and tell a little bit about yourself and your business. So I'll start right here. Please stand.
Hi, my name is Emily Krog, and I'm a student at Michigan State right now, senior year, and I'm studying advertising management with a specialization in sales and a specialization in public relations. And right now I'm doing the live tweeting from LA2M, #LA2M. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mara Coughlin, co-owner of the AN magazine. We are a monthly insert in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and the Ann Arbor News.
Hello, my name is Benjamin Weatherston, commercial editorial photographer, and I also work with the AN magazine. Thank you very much. This was great information.
Jim McBee, I just moved here. I'm also a partner in the AN, and I'm sort of representing the journalism side of it. Good afternoon, Kurt. Hey, Manuel. I'll explain, my little blurb will be what I took away from today. We're really in the mode of getting away from our problems and trying to move forward. We are looking to hire 2 or 3 people this summer. I can't learn quick enough. I need some help with WordPress.
Ross isn't here today.
Hi, I'm Greg Wilson. I am a recent graduate of the Public Relations program in Northern Michigan. I'm doing a little bit of freelance work right now, but I'm looking for a full-time job in digital. I've been reading a lot of content strategy things lately, and I love it. So, anyway.
Hi, I'm Laura Kirchner with Ingenix, and I applaud your effort to put positive media out there. It's, I hate the news normally. I've stopped watching it a lot of the time, so thank you. I appreciate it.
Hi, I'm John Fields. I'm an anthropologist and very interested in marketing and content creation, quite a few other things, and currently doing some freelance work for a state agency in Ohio and looking for more permanent things here in the Ann Arbor area.
Hi, I'm Christy Rawson. I do independent consulting in the higher education sector. Thanks for your program. It's great.
Hi everybody, I'm Jim Musial and I have a consulting company in web and mobile development. I specialize in helping companies move towards mobility. So if your website needs help on mobility, I'd love to talk to you. Thanks.
I'm Stacy from Dollarville Printing, your local digital print shop. We're like the Jimmy John's of printing. I came up with that last week. I thought it was cool. Pretty fast.
I'm Tom Bobney. I'm a mobile exhibit specialist. We put basically your trade show on wheels.
Hi, my name is Jordan. I'm with Dexter Builders. We're a full-service building company, so we do everything from small handyman projects to building and designing entire houses.
Hi, I'm Barb Davenport. I'm with the Ann Arbor Ypsilanti Regional Team.
Hi, I'm Eva Johnson. I'm an in-your-home personal trainer and fitness blogger.
Daniel Bingham. I recently founded Cypress Counseling Center. I'm a psychologist. I provide individual couples and family therapy. I also provide personal sessions, personal growth sessions. I'm really passionate about helping people achieve goals that sometimes seem just out of reach and developing clearer vision for the future and more meaning in their lives. Thank you for the presentation today. I wouldn't be surprised if the economic growth associated with community attachment is also connected to, with that attachment also, mental health improvements. Thank you.
Hi, Tom Crawford, mobile app developer. The app you should probably check out is Happy Hour Deals. Another way you can find out about all the great businesses around town in southern Michigan, so you can do that. Awesome presentation, one of the best I've seen in a long time. Love the creativity of the business model and the success. It's awesome.
My name is Leah DeMichelle. I'm an urban planner with Beckett Mader, a landscape architecture planning and engineering firm here in town, but I'm pretty new at that, and I landed in the career of urban planning after the collapse of journalism in 2009, so you were just knocking my socks off.
I'm Steve Gill. I have a new company called Learning to Be Great. It's an online place to find people and tools to improve organizational effectiveness.
I'm Roger Rayle. I'm a venture catalyst, and after having videoed about a dozen of the Concentrate media events, most of them here, it's finally good to find out the whole background behind the whole organization and what wonderful work you guys are doing. So maybe we can talk afterward.
Hello, my name is Mike Brace, and I work for University Office Technology. We deal in, we have about 4,000 clients here locally that we provide office equipment, printers, copiers, scanners, fax machines, things like that. We've been around for 40 years, so it's we're right on Washtenaw. Looking for an opportunity to speak to companies both about those types of equipment and a larger conversation about electronic document management, whether it be EMRs, which is the medical records, or document management as a whole. Mike Brace, Mike Brace, University Office Technology. There we go.
I'm Perry Sherwin from Print Studios. I'm a commercial and journal portrait photographer. Covers almost everything except for weddings, from portraits to open the wall to executive portraits, products. I shoot a lot of running and golf. So if you're a runner, you've probably seen me standing behind the big lens to run by, or ran next to me doing a marathon. And images I shoot at these meetings go up on the Facebook page.
And I'm Mary Lou Old. I'm the manager of LA2M. Thanks everyone for coming out today. One more round of applause for our speakers. Our speaker is Colin Milan, and he's going to be talking to us about turning our work history into a compelling narrative, and everyone needs that. So thanks for coming out, and see you next week.